And we're live. Oh my goodness. Welcome yet again to another edition of PCS Impact Q&A. I am your host, MJ Boyce, the Community Director of Community Outreach at PCS Grades. Apparently, Murphy is crawling straight up my rear end today because I can't get words out. Oh my gosh. With me, as always, is the lovely Megan Harless, our resident PCS reform advocate. And oh, by the way, resident BA, censored for little ears in your room because we love you. We've got a great show for you today. We've got our employment experts to talk to us a little bit about how to navigate either keeping our jobs, finding a job, or running our business when we have to PCS, because guess what? We're gonna. But before we get to them and before we get to those DoD updates from Megan, I'm going to go ahead and give those housekeeping items as I do every week. Ready, set, here we go. All right. So first and foremost, we have the answers. And if we don't have the answers, guess what? We know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your questions for action and get back to you with an answer. Speaking of questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment box. Any questions, comments, or concerns? LOL smiley faces are good and encouraged, but they don't count towards an entry to win for the Wheel of Names at the end. As always, we will be giving away some Hope Design Limited bling, as well as some PCS grade swag and maybe a little something on the back end. We shall see. Okay, so again, questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and leave them in there. Any shout outs, do it all day. Next up, we bring the experts to you. They are the source. You have this opportunity to ask the people who have been there, done that, and oh, by the way, are doing that for you, from Transcom, from education experts, employment experts, military movers, real estate agents. We've got it all for you to ask those PCS questions. Sometimes you're going to have those questions or those specific situations specific to you and your military family. And in those specific cases, there are two forever and always resources. Number one, your local chain of command. Number two, your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the people who could take your issues and further them for actual action. Last, but certainly not least, we need to do our part, people. We've got to flatten the curve. We have got to flatten this curve. I think we might be on the horizon, but we've said that 150 times. Wear your mask, social distance, whatever it takes to flatten that curve, because when we flatten that curve, we're going to flatten Murphy with it. Do you hear me, Murphy? We are coming for you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Megan for those DoD updates. Megan? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. Caught myself. Just a couple of updates for you. We have seen a lot of folks are starting to get their orders in hand, so RFOs, whatever it may be that your service gives you. Once you have your hard official orders in hand, make sure you get on move.mil, go to DPS, and make sure you get your move set up as soon as possible. Setting your move up on DPS as soon as possible gives the military and gives your assigned company time to plan for your move and prepare for your move. If you wait until you're 3 weeks out from your move, more than likely you're going to get kind of squeezed in wherever they can get you, and it's going to be jumping through hoops. So as soon as you get your orders, get your move set up. The second thing is we're hearing a lot of folks saying, we're moving this summer and we've had our moves set up, for a couple of months, haven't heard anything, haven't been assigned to TSP yet. What is going on there? You will probably not get assigned a TSP until either late February or early March. Every year, the moving industry with Transcom, with the DoD, they go through this phase called rate filing, where they file the moving companies, they file their new rates for the moving season, which takes effect May 15th. So until those rates are in place and approved and finalized, you will not be getting a company assigned until that is done. So probably around late February or sometime in March, you'll start seeing DPS populate and start getting all those DPS emails that you had a transportation service provider assigned and then your local agents assigned. So if you've got questions, you got issues, start making a list of them. So as soon as you get your notification for your company, you can contact that person or when they contact you and start asking all those questions. But just be patient on that for now. And when you get your orders, get your moves set up. So that's all I've got for now. Send it back to you, MJ. You're muted now.
Mute. Story of my life. Every time. Forget you, Murphy. Forget you. Anyways, so thank you for those DoD updates. Again, everyone, Megan goes down that policy rabbit hole so that we don't have to. She's that advocate at the helm, and she breaks it down Barney style for the peeps like me. Okay, on to our lovely guests. We have some great friends of PCS grades and also great friends of ours. I would first like to introduce you to Brian Alvarado from Hiring Our Heroes Military Spouse Employment Program, and I would like to say he is my buddy. My bro from another Mo, if you will. Brian, would you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Like MJ alluded to, I'm the Deputy Director of Workforce Development at Hiring Our Heroes, which is an initiative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I am the spouse of a recently retired U.S. sailor who decided to go right back to work for the Navy as a civilian here in Washington, D.C. So we don't have to deal with PCSs anymore, but we certainly have had our fair share.
Word. Welcome, Brian. And shout out to Matt. I hope he's watching. It's your job, dude. Come on. Next up, I have Miss Sue Hoppin with the National Military Spouse Network. Very dear friend of ours and my accountability partner, both officially and unofficially. Sue, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, and I'm going to just wave the BS flag that I didn't get as much love as Brian here, I'm gonna have to work harder, I think, MJ, to get in your good graces. But thank you so much for having me on with you guys. I'm really excited to have this conversation because these are all friends and this is a great topic. My name is Sue Hoppin and I founded the National Military Spouse Network almost 11 years ago now. My husband served in the Air Force for 22 years and retired almost 7 years ago. That seems ages ago. And my experience was like a lot of yours, right? I had experience before I married my husband. I already had a degree and we got married and we had decided that if we got pregnant, one of us was going to stay home and take care of our child if we were able to. Clearly that was going to be me because he was still deploying all over the world. And, by the time I turned around and was able to go find work, 14 years had passed. I know that sounds insane, but by the time our son was old enough to go to school so I could work full time, we were overseas. And then we encountered SOFA issues and job availability, right? So by the time I came back to DC, I was so excited. And I'm like, you know what? This is my town. I'm from Northern Virginia and I have multiple degrees. I speak multiple languages and they're going to be lining up to hire me. And that was not the case because what I found quickly was that I wasn't that special. And the only thing special about me was that I was a military spouse and people were going to go out of their way not to hire me. So that's why I started the National Military Spouse Network. My background is in international studies, but my career background is in nonprofits and military advocacy. So I think I will just leave it at that for now.
Okay. And then I'm just going to address your BS flag there just right quick. I was waiting.
We're taking it casual.
I was totally waiting for you to drop what you've done so that I can be like, yeah, I know her. And I'm cool because of it. Write it down.
I love giving you grief. I love giving you all grief.
Oh my gosh. I'm so thankful that you guys are here because, obviously everything looks weird with COVID right now. And we're already dealing with the PCS thing, which is looking a little bit different, but we're also dealing with, employment issues as military spouses. We already had challenges. Well, let's go ahead and add another thing to that list, right? Thanks, COVID. We're coming after you and Murphy. Write it down. We're just going to go ahead and just dive right into these questions. So here we go. I'm going to start with you, Sue. Firstly, let's just tell us about what the National Military Spouse Network is and in what ways does it support our military spouse community?
Sure. So I started the National Military Spouse Network because I looked around, and this was 11 years ago, and I looked around, there wasn't really anybody addressing spouse employment issues. It was always ad hoc, right? It was always like one of the big VSOs saying, okay, let's add this to the list, but it never really perked up to the priority. And I'm like, this is like, our issues should be a priority. It shouldn't be like, oh, let's take care of veterans and spouses. It's like, let's just talk about spouses. And I really just wanted to create more opportunities for military spouses because, like a lot of you, and certainly the ones on this call right here, we all believe in the all-volunteer force, right? We don't believe that a service member should have to choose between serving their country, doing the job that they love, and doing what's best for their family. And I think one of the biggest challenges to that is military spouse employment, because if a spouse could potentially make more than their service member, then there's more pressure for that service member to get out. So the spouse doesn't have to PCS anymore, right? And so we just love that we're working with people like Brian and the Chamber and you all and everybody else who's come alongside over the last 11 years to like find ways to remove those impediments to spouse employment. Because if a service member can stay in as long as they want, and a spouse can be happy and gainfully employed, then the nation wins, right? That's why we call it a national security issue. And so NMSN does whatever we can to help create those opportunities for spouses, whether it's training them through our summits, whether it's giving them the information they need through our digital magazines, or whether it's advocacy, which we've been doing a lot over the past 3 years. You know, we recognize that we can make incremental changes for spouse employment, but we can't make any big, significant institutional changes until we change the policies that affect employment, right? And so for the last 3 years, we've looked at all the great research being done by the Chamber, by Blue Star Families, by MFAN, by so many great organizations. And we're like, you know what? We can look at all the great research, all the great surveys, and we can spit out recommendations. Like, look, these are what all of our colleagues are saying. And we're going to take it a step further and we're going to say, if you do these 5 things or these 3 things, you can make a difference. And, you know, our first white paper, I think it was kind of naive because I'm like, you know what? I'm really sick of nobody doing anything. So we're going to go do something. And we just like spit out these recommendations. We were so surprised that every recommendation that we made that required policy change was introduced as potential legislation. And then the second year that happened again. And then this year, our white paper, which I have the link and I think Stacey is going to put up there, but we have 5 very aggressive recommendations. And these are things that would really move the needle. We have things on there like, hey, let's expand the Veterans Employment Act and include military spouses in there so that, you know, there's a requirement to hire military spouses for DoD contracts or work with military spouse-owned businesses. Let's think about maybe transferring, giving veterans the ability to transfer their priority placement points to their caregiver or spouse. You know, like things like that would really make a difference. And then, you know, the other things that we talked about outside the 5 recommendations are expand the WOTC. We're going to keep harping on that. We think that you really, really do need to have an incentive to hire military.
What is the WOTC?
It's the work opportunity tax credit. And what that does, thank you, is it incentivizes employers to hire people in protected work classes by giving them a tax credit. And so one of the things that makes, you know what, I'm just supposed to introduce NMSN and I just went in. So I'm just going to stop.
No, I love it because it shows your passion for what you do. And let's just be real, especially when it comes to employment with military spouses and getting into the weeds when it comes to policy. You had better have some passion because that's the only way you're going to bring some game.
Because it's exhausting, right? It's a long game. But I mean, like, I'm going to stop taking up all the air in the room. And wait for
my gosh.
But it's because NMSN you guys have done a lot of good things. And so, you know, everything you've just explained and said, it's important and folks need to know about it and know that you guys have done so much and that you've been there in the rooms, in the conversations, in the discussions, pushing legislation and doing all of that good stuff. So it's good. We could just let you keep going and we'd be great for the next hour.
No, I appreciate that, Megan. No, and so I will just close by saying that, you know, we do the white papers and the new one is out right now. And then we are so fortunate to have so many friends and allies like Brian and, you know, like you guys. And it's awesome because we're all working on behalf of military spouses. And it's just great that we have like all these minds thinking about these issues. And now we've all prioritized these issues as, hey, this is something that we all need to get on board with. So then when we go up on Capitol Hill virtually in May for our Day of Advocacy, then it's all of us doing it, right? And it's all of us doing it and focusing on spouse employment for just one day. And it isn't that we're asking for more benefits for military spouses in the rest of the country, because let's be real, the whole country's hurting, right? Like there's going to be so many unemployed people coming out of this pandemic. So we're not saying that military spouses are more special. We're just saying that military spouse unemployment was around 24% before the pandemic. And we think that's probably going to go up significantly. And like before the pandemic, I think the unemployment rate, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, was around 3 or 4%. And I mean, so our unemployment rate was already exponentially higher. And I really think that whatever we do to lift military spouses, these are not just, germane to our population. These best practices can then be exported to other people, like other people with transient populations. So, I mean, I just want to clarify that first off, because people are gonna be like, why should we care about military spouses when the whole country's hurting? I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can care about unemployment, period. And all we're trying to do is elevate the issue of military spouses by saying, hey, here's a population you may not have thought of because we were very small. It's less than 1% who serve. And like the pain points in the military spouse community are going to be particularly acute because it's higher, right? So just, my 2 cents.
I really like how you said, yeah, they can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like if we can do it, like so can they. It's called multitasking, Pete.
Right.
Okay. And so Brian, same question. Tell us about hiring our heroes and tell us about in what ways that it supports the military spouse community.
Yeah. So as a military spouse myself, I did what a lot of military spouses do and got into the volunteer rabbit hole while my spouse was active duty. And I did everything from serving as a U.S. Navy ombudsman to leading as a president of a family readiness group. And somewhere around 8 years ago or so, I was hosting an event at Naval Base Coronado, and I met a young 19-year-old spouse who married her high school sweetheart from a really small town in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. And they graduated high school. The husband went to boot camp and then said, we're moving to San Diego. And so she packed up and met him in San Diego, which is a military metropolis. I mean, it is a huge city. It's 60 miles wide. It is very heavily, military related, military friendly, but it is very spread out. It's very expensive to live there. And as I got to know her, she started to open up to me and started to talk to me about some of the struggles that they were having. Her husband was an E3 and she was having a hard time finding a job. You all can pretty much guess what that means financially in living in a city like San Diego, especially when you're at a naval base Coronado, right? So it's a very expensive. They were living an hour out away from the base, and what that does to a family as far as commute is concerned, and worrying about all of the other delicate issues that face our military community, living so far away, shouldn't have to be one of them because of finances. And I said to her, well, what's the problem? Why can't you get a job? And she said, well, I'm going to school online to get my bachelor's degree. And I want to start working somewhere that's going to actually help me get where I want to be in my career. I don't want to be a waitress. I don't want to work at McDonald's. I want some entry level in business. She was trying to get her business degree. And I said to myself, there has got to be, I mean, I have had a great career. I know a ton of people, even 8 years ago. And I said, there's got to be something I can do. And so I just reached out to my network and said, hey guys, I've got this really smart young military spouse who's looking for, an entry level position. Does anybody have anything? Sure enough, a friend of mine worked at a finance company, said, I have my receptionist just put in her notice. He said, I'd love to talk to her. So I just made a connection. And what happened from then on was her and what she brought to the table. And it's 8 years later, and she still works for a company, has earned her degree, has been promoted 5 times, and makes more than her service member. Now, while that is something to celebrate, let's bring it back to me. All I did was make a connection. But that connection that I made was very addictive for me. It was knowing that just that little bit of effort that I could make because of who I am and the connections I have made me want to do it more. And so I ended up finding Hiring Our Heroes, or Hiring Our Heroes found me years ago. And I started volunteering with the organization out in San Diego with their Military Spouse Professional Network, which is a network now of 60 global networks around defense communities that we all live in and around, with a focus on peer-to-peer networking, professional development, and employer engagement. And each one is run by a volunteer military spouse. And so I ran the one out in San Diego for about 4.5 years before moving to DC and becoming a staffer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and Hiring Our Heroes, where now I get to work every day, all day, on programs that provide opportunity for military spouses to get to that next career destination, whatever it is, whether it's a first-time, job seeker to, attorneys and doctors and lawyers that we work with through our multiple programs that include the Military Spouse Professional Network, to include the Military Spouse Economic Empowerment Zones, which are community-based zones that are comprised of local government leaders, local military leaders, local business leaders around defense communities that create working groups that attack the issues in their communities that may be different from other locations, like industry, market labor options, those sort of things. And our professional development series, through our 2-day career intensive Amplify, our employer engagement opportunities with our Grow program. And it's exciting for me to be able to continue to do this work and now lead the programs and lead the team of professionals that do this really important work.
Well, that is just fantastic. And I'm hope everybody's writing this down, but if you're not, that's okay. Because the lovely Lizanne Lightfoot, who is she's our content editor over at PCS Grades, she's going ahead and transcribing everything that just happened, everything he just said, every resource. And by the way, our back-end individual, Stacy Benson, who is our back-end community outreach manager, if you could just throw up the link to that Hiring Our Heroes site, please. And I love that we have these resources. And what I love more about what both of you said was that you're doing this in conjunction and oftentimes in partnership versus competition with one another, because our community needs that so badly. So that's key. And I just want to give you a shout out for that. And I want other orgs to take note. Okay, on to you, Meg.
Yeah, so when we talk about PCSing, a lot of times we talk about, the stresses of just, the family moving from one location to another, finding a house, finding a neighborhood, those types of things. But we know, a lot of spouses, they face a lot of stress and big factors when it comes to finding new employment when they PCS as well. So for you, Sue, what are some of the big factors and stressors that military spouses are encountering when they PCS when it comes to employment and finding something new at their new location?
So one of the biggest things we've seen and the trends that we're watching is that I think from the advent of joining forces under the Obama administration to what the past administration did and what Dr. Biden's poised to do with Rory Brocious at the helm for this joining forces 2.0 is really great about bringing employers to the table to hire military spouses, but the employers aren't doing such a great job about retaining military spouses through PCS moves. And I think, Brian and his team are starting to work on this, and we're certainly looking at this. And I think that's the biggest challenge, where we need to flip the dynamic, right? And look at a military spouse as we would a regular civilian, which is they manage their career. They don't manage their job while they're at a position, while they're at an installation. So if we change that dynamic and we look at managing a career, then the employer can become a partner. And we're looking at them and saying, hey, I work for this huge company. You have multiple outlets all around the world. What can we do about retaining me through my PCS? Because I still bring value to the company. I understand the ethos. I am on board 100%, and I would love to maintain my job, even if it means maybe making a lateral move when I move, right? So that's one challenge, is that I'm not seeing a lot of spouses retaining their jobs at their current employment, at their current employer through PCS. If they're entrepreneurs, a big challenge for them is having to find new clients. And so, they're having to basically pack up and start all over again. And if they're going overseas, that's, like compounded by the fact that now they have to worry about, well, what kind of provisions does the installation have for me to have a home-based business? Or how do I freelance overseas? What are the taxation issues? What are the SOFA issues involved? Can I even work at that location?
Pause. SOFA.
SOFA, yeah. And it's, the Status of Forces Agreement. So if you're a DoD spouse, Department of Defense spouse, you basically fall under the SOFA unless you're somehow assigned to the State Department or another agency, then you'll fall under Chief of Mission. But like for this purpose, I'm going to use the SOFA, right? The ones that fall under Status of Forces. So one of the things that we bring out in our white paper is that all the regulations around like the ability to work on installations, CONUS and OCONUS, like in the States and outside the States, it's as clear as mud. Like it's not written anywhere. It's almost like you have to divine it, or you have to know somebody once you PCS and then they have to want to invest in you and tell you about it. I'm like, it should not be that difficult. Like if I'm a military spouse and I'm moving and I have the potential to move overseas, like 3 locations, and somewhere is a website where I know that, hey, Japan is much more friendly tax-wise to military spouses if you want to work overseas. All things being equal, that would allow me to then say, hey, on your dream sheet, which I can ignore anyway, but like on your dream sheet, maybe elevate Japan, right? And then like, because for me, for my working ability, I'd rather we go to Japan. And so those are some of the issues that can certainly be mitigated, but those are the things that we're hearing the most, is that lack of consistency, that lack of mobility, with the PCSs, and then also like having to restart every single time you move. And then, you bring into that licensing and certification, those requirements and those costs. I mean, it's everything plus more. And I'm a little bit at a loss about why we're here, because with the advent of technology and everybody getting on board with telework, we should be further along with some of these solutions. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to
I'm going to pause there and ask you actually, and I'm sure, Brian, you can probably attest to this. Like the way that I'm looking at it is what we have been pushing for employment wise, like military spouses, that mobility and that portability of the jobs that we have and taking them with us. If we can, we should. And now the civilian population is being forced into doing it. So guess what, people? It works. Okay. It works. So now that we have that litmus test out of the way, can we get a break, please?
No, and I totally agree with that, because I think one of the things, we had an opportunity to have a conversation with Secretary of Defense Austin before he was confirmed. So he was a designate then. And what we told him is, this is actually one of the few silver linings of the pandemic, is that it has destigmatized working from home, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I feel like we military spouses are so poised to just do so much better coming out of the pandemic, because what the pandemic was an opportunity for us to highlight how this is just another kink in our day.
Day in the life.
This is ruining your entire 2020. But to me, this is just an extended deployment that just happens to really suck. And I'm sure all the military spouses out there are like, amen, right? Because it's like everybody else is like, oh my God, I have all these. And you're like, yeah, and like, what's your gripe, right? Welcome to our lives. So, I do think that, I don't know, Brian can speak more to this, but I do think, Brian, what do you think? I think that it has destigmatized work from home.
Yeah, I think absolutely destigmatizing working from home through making the business case and experiencing the opportunity to have successful remote working teams. And we all learn from experience, right? So we were afraid of it, but now we have this experience as business operators that it can still work. But then the other side of that is also an evaluation of how much money we can save as companies on real estate. I mean, I was watching and participating in a Washington Post webinar the other day where they were talking about the future of the working professional in America. And one of the things that they talked about was the fact that we're 13.5% more productive when we are working from home. And the reason for that is twofold. One is we're working 2 to 3 hours more a day because we are not going to lunch with Sally or meeting Bob at the water cooler or having our best friend Stephanie come into our office and chat for 45 minutes. Like we're being more productive than we are when we're, physically around a lot of people. But another piece of this is understanding that this we have to look at the percentage of military spouses that fit into that professional working world. And when we talk about PCSing and employment, that is actually quite a small number of military spouses in comparison to the larger, full military spouse community. We're seeing a lot of spouses that, are 19 to 22 to 23 years old that have not graduated from college, that do work in retail and hospitality and those types of things. And, those jobs are not portable. Those jobs are in-person, jobs. And we need to be looking at how we can address with employers, that population of military spouses to include, I'm not going to name a name, but a really huge big box store who has a military spouse program came to us and said, what else can we do? And we said, you have to be able to have a job for job across your organization. So if I'm a floor supervisor and I move to another city where you can move me, but the only open job is a bag person, that's not helping the career path, right? For that organization. And so we worked with them to create this opportunity for that population to be able to, keep their career and move their career. So I just want to kind of mention that because, we're looking at like roughly 70 to 80% of all military spouses are not experienced working professionals, right? They're entry level, they're young and inexperienced, and we need to be working to help that population as well as our high level professionals.
So it's interesting that you say that because actually Gabrielle Cook, shout out Gabrielle, she says it just like that. How can you help those younger spouses who are not long ago graduated, but they don't have a degree? Like my concern has always been trying to find a good job, but college really wasn't for me. So I feel like I won't get a good job. So what you're saying is that's something that like HOH is concentrating on, is getting to our community when they're, right there, right where Gabrielle might be.
Yeah, and it's not just hiring our heroes. I mean, the research that Sue does and builds on with her organization, as well as our friends at MFAN and even the Department of Defense, we're all looking at how are we supporting the licensure portability factor for licensed professionals? How are we supporting educating the employers about the remote work opportunities and keeping jobs portable? And how are we reaching employers that are hiring the entry level positions and sort of retail and hospitality? But I want to mention to answer Gabrielle's question. What do you do? And I tell every military spouse this every day of my life. You go to Military OneSource and you look up the Military Spouse Employment Partnership list. And there are over 500 companies in this country that have raised their hand and said, we want to hire military spouses. And what that's going to do, MJ, is it's going to help us stop beating our head up against a wall and getting doors slammed in our faces as military spouses, because the Department of Defense has built this coalition along with Sue and Hiring Our Heroes and all of us. We've built a coalition of companies and we've educated them on the military spouse experience and all of the delicate issues that face our community. And it helps ease that relationship building between a job seeker and an employer.
And I think I'm sorry, MJ.
Go ahead. Go.
One of the things that Brian brings up about Military OneSource is, and Gabrielle brings up, is you don't have to have a college degree to be on a good career path. But what I would encourage you to do is, even though you need to find, I remember Sheila Casey talking about this way back when General Casey was the chief of staff of the Army. She's like, I love that you guys are all focused on career professionals, but focus on the families that need to also find JOB jobs when they land at an installation, because that's the difference between paying bills and not paying bills. Mm-hmm. But what that does not do is it does not preclude you from taking an active interest in your career development. So, Gabrielle, you don't need to have a college degree, but you do need to continue with professional development. And so that means finding the job that you're happy with now, but also doing the hard work to assess where do you want to be and what do you need to do to get yourself there. So that might mean taking a certificate. I mean, if you decide that, like you are really interested in data science, and that's like looking at all the free programs available for military spouses to take advantage of a free program and learning data science, right? If it means that you want to learn how to code because you think that that's a really profitable place that you might want to go, then that means that you're looking for opportunities to go to General Assembly, or you're looking for free classes. If it means you want to build a business, that means you know about IBMF and that you know that they do free training for military spouses. So I don't think it's necessarily a college degree, but I do think that you have to own that you have to do a certain level of professional development, because otherwise you're going to be stuck in that we can find you any amount of jobs you want, but we want to develop you as a person, as a professional. And that doesn't mean you have to go to college. That means that you have to actively engage in taking the long look and saying, I'm good with where I'm at now, but this is where I want to be. I mean, and if you've not heard MJ's story, go listen to MJ's story, because it was like one of those, this is where I am now, this is where I think I want to be, but I want to see further down the line what I want to do. And then there's that recognition that, okay, so I'm kind of missing some of those things. I'm missing, I don't understand Microsoft. I need to go and I need to take a Microsoft class, right, to make me eligible for those kind of positions. So I would encourage, I think it's exciting because, like Brian said, there's so many initiatives out there to find military spouse-friendly employers, but I think that's just the start. And for me, it's I'll always invest in military spouses who are really interested in their careers, but I can't care more about your career than you do. And so if all you care about is finding a job, Brian can find you a job any day. He has so many people in his network. I think any class can find you a job. But what we're hoping we do is help you discover your passion, your career, so that you maintain that, so that you're able to reach your own ambitions and your goals in the military lifestyle. To me, that's successful. And we hope you find that. I'm speaking for all of us, but I hope you
absolutely. No, absolutely. And whatever dynamic that looks like success, the definition of success looks different for every single one of us. And it doesn't always look the same over time.
Nope.
So just a couple of things, Sue had mentioned, if you didn't know MJ's story, first of all, let me just tell you that we did an Instagram live just before this, because we're all about the camera today. Boom. So if you're on Instagram, go ahead and go over to the NMS Network. We'll drop that handle for Instagram in there. Go watch today's live and you'll hear all about the crazy that is my life. Guess what? My career trajectory probably is similar to yours, because that's just the way it rolls. That's number one. Number two, Brian mentioned the Military Spouse Employment Partnership. It just so happens that guess what? PCS Grades was recently inducted into the Military Spouse Employment Partnership through the Department of Defense. We are also recently been named a official vetted relocation resource for Military OneSource. But, I think it was, it was somebody in our, Monica Barfield, shout out Monica, actually asked, if we could tell you a little bit more about, the spouse education career opportunities, which I believe is part of MSEP. NESEP, depending on, we love our acronyms, right? Which I will actually get with you on the offline about that. I'll get you that information for sure, Monica. But, all of these organizations are doing this specifically for you. And then the last thing that I will say specifically is that just like Brian said, like hitting the mark when it comes to the younger spouses, and not just finding out what your passion is, but growing that. You might think I need to be my goal is to run for office, so that's why I'm pursuing X, Y, and Z. When in actuality, you just want to be a community builder. You want to take care of your community. In this life, you can do that in spades. Don't set your sights on one thing and think that if you don't reach that one thing and it doesn't look like that one thing in your head, that you're not going to reach your goal. That's huge. All right, I'm going to pivot here real quick, because we have, first of all, audience, you're on fire, and we are going to get to some of your questions throughout. You are literally on fire. Remember, again, entry to win. Keep it coming. Share if you want to. All right, so I'm going to start this one off with Brian. So the vast majority of us, right, we're forced to leave our jobs. the JLB parts, when we PCS. So, we kind of touched on potentially doing that remotely, and keeping it. And Megan's going to talk, ask a little bit more about that later. But, when our service members receive their official set of orders, how is it that we should approach specifically that dreaded breakup conversation with our current employer? Like sometimes I haven't even wanted to enter that conversation. So I always think, how close to the wire can I get before I say something that's absolutely acceptable? Or maybe I could just lead him on and work remotely and he'll never know. And maybe I don't have to have that breakup conversation. What would you say? How should we approach that conversation?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit to unpack there. I want to go with honesty is the best policy. But one thing that's really important to for us to sort of take a look at when we're talking about this particular topic is people do not work the way that they used to. People would get into jobs and be in that job for 20 years, and that just is not the case anymore. We're looking at an average of 2 to 3 years that people spend in jobs. Guess what else is 2 to 3 years? PCSing, right? So one, I want to take that word dreaded out of the question, because this is a conversation that people are having, whether or not you're in the military community or not. And I'm a firm believer that if you are in a good position in your career, in your job, then you have a leader who is advocating for you and for your growth. And I would not want any of my staff to work for me for more than 3 years. I want them to come, do great work, and build, and then grow. So let's we have the power to change the conversation, right? We do. We have the power to change that conversation. So when you talk about how do you address this, right, with your supervisor or your organization, I'm telling you, honesty is the best policy. But you have to put you first. And what do you owe that company? You professionally owe that company a 2-week notice, unless otherwise stated in whatever contract you have, whether it's, sometimes it can be 30 days or 60 days or whatever. But that's what you owe that company, right? For their investment in you as an employee, and what you need to give them as far as notice is concerned. Now, if you want to have a conversation about potentially moving your position to a remote position, come to that conversation completely prepared. Do your research on what that actually looks like for you, and say, look, when I move, I need X amount of time to get the move completed. And then I will be online and I will be in this environment at this time, ready and able to do this work. And that's you have to put in that work to make that proposal happen. So it just depends on what your situation is. Do you want to keep and move this job with you? Then you have to propose it, have it in writing, and actually get detailed, because it might open their eyes. You never know. But otherwise, you don't owe anybody any more than 2 weeks notice.
Yeah. I would also add that, if you're going to come to the table, like Brian says, you have to make the business case for it, like how that would work for them and the impact that them letting you go would have on the business. So we have a friend who it's very specific, right? So he was writing, he's a lawyer, but he's a foreign lawyer. He's from France, and because he's married to a U.S. service member. And so he's not able to practice law. So what he did was he was writing a law journal, a newsletter. So he was writing this newsletter for this company. So what he did was he's like, well, we're PCSing, but I can still write the journal. I can still do this. And this is how it would work. And I will come back once a quarter if you need me, or whatever you decide you need me to do to get that face-to-face time with the leadership. So he went and he researched it. He researched the impact of what they would have to find. And so I think with his thing, he didn't end up keeping the job the whole time. I think it allowed him to move with the job, and he kept it for that PCS. And then when they PCS again, he didn't keep it, because they could. It also gave the company time to replace him with someone that they really wanted, instead of having to go and find someone in 2 weeks or a month. So because he made the business case, there was going to be no impact to the company. like zero impact because he was still doing his job. But he had to make that case. And part of that case has to be, what would the negative impact to the company be if they just let him go? And what I would also say is, I think we would be remiss if we said, if they choose to let you go, I hope that in your pocket you have the resume of someone who's a military spouse who you're like, if that's the case, I appreciate, thanks for listening. Here's a military spouse moving to the area who'd be really great in this position.
Boom.
And, I'll just add in here, a great place to do that is the Military Spouse Professional Network. Because that organization, that program was initially started so that we as military spouses could build professional networks and leave them behind for those PCSing in, as we go around our military PCS journey. When I left San Diego and came to Washington, D.C., I did a lot of handing off. I did a lot of connection making and made sure that I had people at the San Diego Regional Chamber connected to military spouses, people from workforce development and economic development organizations passed on to military spouses, because that's really the purpose of that. So that's I could not agree more with Sue, and I just got little chill bumps all over when she said that, because that is what it's all about. If it's not going to work out, then continue supporting the military spouse community and bring a resume. I love that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Passion, y'all. Passion.
You guys kind of touched on it already a little bit with the remote working and how to come to the table for that. How does somebody kind of broach that subject with their employer? Do you have tips for how to have that conversation? And when you talk about research to kind of show them what, the benefits of them being able to still remote work, what type of research can you go more into depth about that? What all do they need to bring to the table with them when they have those conversations to help them be more prepared for it?
Well, I think at this point, we're in a much better place than we ever have been, because there are business cases out there that we can refer to. Look, nobody wants a global pandemic, but let's face it, this is a good thing coming out of this experience as a nation and as a global community. And we have to be thankful for technology and the ability to complete tasks digitally, where we don't have to be sitting in an office, and to prepare yourself to make that business case. I'll repeat myself. Go through your workday, go through your task list and your goals for the next year, and actually write out what it looks like, what it takes for you to do that job and to complete those tasks and to reach those goals, and prove that you being in an office is not a requirement to get to that goal. Sue?
I would also do some research about the company itself and see if there's any precedence for that kind of work environment. Because if someone in the company is already doing that, then that gives your supervisor a touch point in the company. So then it makes it easier for them to make that business case for you, because then they're not the first ones asking the company to take this huge leap. So you can say, I spoke to Mark S in marketing. They're doing this with their employee, and this is how it works. And so I think a lot of times, if you're asking someone to think of something from square one, it's a lot of information to digest, and it may be helpful down the line for someone else, but maybe not for you, because it's just too much for them to process in a short amount of time. But if someone in the company is already doing it, that means someone in the company has already bought off on it. And so I think I would add that to your research as well. Just see if someone in the company already has that existing type of setup.
No, and you know what? That makes perfect sense. That's oddly enough, that's not something that I would have ever just off the top of my head thought to do, because you're right. Every company is different, but just, seeing if it happened before, that makes y'all's job a lot easier if you're trying to justify a remote position. And, I think that kind of goes along with Monica's question. If I move to a different duty station and there's the same company I work for now, can I ask for a transfer? Will the job position guarantee me? So there's no guarantees in this life. I'm sure everybody on this panel right now will tell them the same thing. There are no such thing as a guarantee. However, it's a guaranteed no if you do nothing. So the worst thing you could do is ask. I mean, the best thing you could do is ask. So, you could be that person that sets the precedent for the military spouse after you and set the tone for the person after you that could say, well, this person did it. Well, Monica did it and she's successful in her endeavors. It does not hurt to ask in any way, shape, or form, right?
So from an employer's perspective, this exact question was answered by Maggie Hahn from USAA. MJ, I think you were at that summit where someone asked her this exact question. And she said, as a hiring man, if I'm in a position at USAA and a military spouse comes to me and says, hey, I'm PCSing to Colorado Springs, can you guarantee me a transfer? And what Maggie said is, I can't guarantee you a transfer within USAA, but what I can do is reach out to my colleague in Colorado Springs and make that phone call and say, hey, I have a really sharp military spouse coming from San Antonio. I hate to lose him, but he's moving to Colorado Springs. Do you have space for him? Because at that point, you have someone who's in a managerial position within the company reaching out to their colleague at your next duty station, and they're making the case for you. And I think that harkens back to something Brian said, which is like the more advocates you can get on your side, the better. And, and in order to do that, though, you have to perform, which means like, don't spend all your time in one duty location thinking about, okay, what am I going to do to make sure I can move with this job? Do your job and do it well so that you come, so that you perk up and your manager realizes and recognizes your value to the organization, right? Because then your ask that manager isn't what are you going to do to guarantee that I keep a job within the organization? Your ask is going to be a more sophisticated, hey, I'm looking at USAA. I work for USAA in San Antonio. I know there's USAA in Colorado Springs. Is there anything I can do to stay within the USAA family? Because I love working with you guys. So then that's a different kind of ask. You leave them the option of saying, I can't do anything for you. I don't know the people in Colorado Springs. But then if you've really made an impact on your manager because you've done a really good job, then they're reaching out there and saying, hey, good person. We can't afford to lose them. What can you do for them?
Yeah.
And that would be a mic drop. Brian, what do you got to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things. One, Monica, if you work for a company that is in multiple locations, one, they probably addressed this conversation before. So like MJ and everybody said, don't be afraid to ask, but do it, in a professional manner without expectations. But one thing that I would point out would be a good thing, in addition to what Sue said, was to do your research and find out what happens at that organization, in that other location. Is it the same type of jobs that are here? Are there different opportunities that I could apply my skill set to? Come to that first conversation prepared and say, this is what I have done here. This is what I've researched about what's happening in this other location. And here's where I can match up skill sets. Is there a way, is there a conversation to be had? Is there a referral that I can earn? And that sort of thing within your ask is to prepare yourself for what is available in that other location.
That's a great tip.
No, absolutely. And one of the things just for the record, and the ask. Like, I used to yell at my kids all the time for saying why. My dad never did that to me. He'd always explain why, so that I would feel okay about asking the questions when it was necessary. And why? Because this why. Oh, I just learned. You know what I mean? If you ask the question why, you have no idea what will happen with that. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here. And let's look at it from a different perspective, okay? Let's look at it from instead of a W-2 employee perspective, let's look at it from like a business owner, an entrepreneur like perspective. So, honestly, I personally have experienced myself. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. It's not something I wanted, looked for, tried for, just did. Okay. It just freaking happened. Okay. That's how it works in our lives. So, right. Yeah. And so I ended up, doing some things freelance style. And for me, doing it online was great. I could carry it wherever, right? But there are some businesses when you're an entrepreneur that your clients are local. Your clients are specific to the location in which you reside. So if a military spouse is an entrepreneur, whether that's offering goods or services, what are some things that they need to be, that like need to keep top of mind? If they want to keep that business running when they're moving to a new duty station, and what challenges should they probably keep an eye out for? We'll start with you, Sue.
Adapt and overcome. Like as a Marine spouse, you totally understand that. You have to adapt and overcome.
Yet!
Because it's one of those things where your business may not survive a PCS, and it's probably not a good business model. And every entrepreneur will say, yeah, I mean, as sad as that is, some of us just, NMSN is a horrible business model, okay? Like, we do advocacy in our business. No business ever made money doing advocacy, but, I power it through my consulting, which is fine. But, it's one of those things where you have to look at your business model. And if what you're offering is a service and you have a unique value proposition, then maybe it's just making simple edits to what you're doing to survive in your next duty location. I love one of our young spouses at NMSN. Like, I love her. And I'm not going to give you her name because she might be embarrassed. We'll call her Elle. So she is, her husband was getting medically retired, and like they were going to move PCS to another location. And then she teaches yoga and wellness, and she was telling us how much she charges. She charges such a low rate. And I'm like, you need to charge more. And then, like give more, like give a discount, like seniors discount or whatever. And so it's interesting because as soon as we started educating her on the entrepreneurial mindset, her business took off because like as she was PCSing, she's like, okay, so I did what you guys said. I fixed my business model. I started doing this and this. I grouped the classes. I'm making so much more money and I'm charging so much more, and they're happy because they think they're getting a deal. So it was really funny because like she just got out of her way and adapted her business, and she used her PCS as an advantage because she's like, well, I don't want to do that to my clients here. And then I'm like, well, then just go. When you PCS, they don't know how much you charge for your business. They don't know how much you charge your services. So like every time you move, it's an opportunity to iterate your business. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I think that's the best part of PCSs, right? Like you can like suck it up, do what you need to do for the years that you're at your location. And if you don't want to make any changes, don't make any changes, don't rock the boat, but then get ready for a big overhaul when you PCS. Like use that as your advantage. And they have to figure out what the installations allow for. And I mean, the Military Spouse Professional Network, our networks, so many other networks, you can get in there and you can ask spouses at the next duty location, like, hey, what's installation commander like? Do they allow businesses, like, what's the competition like? They can actually do their research before they go. I say mitigate all that. One of the things that military spouses overlook, though, are taxes and legal issues. Like, they need to connect with their local SBA office. And, they sound like a VBOC, like veteran.
Break down the acronym, Sue. SBA?
I was doing that. So SBA is Small Business Administration. VBOC is Veteran Business Office Center. And, so they need, like in Springfield, we have this community business partnership, and they offer like you pay $50 to go and do an introduction or whatever course. And after that, the services are free, or they're very, very low cost. I mean, very low cost. And they have office visits. So you can meet with a lawyer, you can meet with an HR person, you can meet with a tax person. Do it. Because every time we have a summit and we do our entrepreneurial day, like even though we're all seasoned, we're like, oh no, I should have been paying taxes in those 2 states because I have. So like I think military spouses, we're so caught up in having a business and just starting a business and just going that we cannot forget the legal ramifications of doing business, right? And so I think as we get like in the habit of consulting with tax people, legal people, and business mentors, that'll help mitigate some of the issues that we have as we're moving from location to location. But I would encourage military spouses who do business to not treat it like a hobby. Mm-hmm. Treat it like a business and put the structure around it that any business would have.
Yeah, I just want to throw in real quick, everything Sue said, I want to throw an exclamation point behind it because it's absolutely imperative that people listen to what Sue just said. And I want to say, take advantage of resources, because folks like the U.S. Small Business Administration, folks like the Rosie Network, these organizations have free programs that help you from concept and idea all the way to scaling responsibly, and everything that goes on in between. I'm hosting a speaker series this year through Hiring Our Heroes on a military spouse entrepreneurial resource series, basically just because, one, I didn't want to start a new program when they already exist, MJ. But what I wanted to do was put resources in front of military spouses that are tried and true. And the SBA, their VBox, their Boots to Business, all of these organizations, they put you not just in line with resources and whatnot, but they put you in a community of like-minded entrepreneurial and small business owner, military and veteran families that can help you on a day-to-day basis when you face trouble, when you face any sort of trouble or questions about being an entrepreneur in a small business, throughout the entire sort of length of that business. So that's just a piece of advice from my perspective and what I've seen. I mean, we watch folks PCS with their businesses all the time, and they do it very methodically. I'm thinking of one jewelry maker that we all know and love, who shuts.
No, it's okay. You can say it. Hope Design Limited. Her name is Lauren Hope. She was out here. Let's speak. And we give away her prizes. Yes, go, Brian. And
she's methodical. She plans out the PCS. She shuts down the business specifically to concentrate on the PCS, right? So she's very thoughtful on it, and she gives herself permission to do it in that capacity so that her family has her attention when they need it, but she still maintains a successful and growing brand. So it is possible. Just take advantage of the resources, take advantage of the community that you're blessed to be a part of, and you can successfully PCS a business.
Word.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of PCSing for spouses, employment, businesses, what is one thing or anything that a military spouse should be doing, could be doing, should start doing in order to keep PCS moves from impacting their career trajectory or their future earning potential?
Plug the PCS in to your business plan or your career plan. I think that's the funniest thing to me is when everyone's like, I'm PCSing again. How's this going to affect my job? And I'm like, it's not a surprise. Like, you knew this was going to happen a couple more.
Surprise orders do happen. Surprise orders do happen. We don't plan a PCS right away.
Yes.
Surprise orders do happen, but PCSing, we know it's coming at some point in life.
Yeah.
Can I ask all of you really quick, and it's related to that, and it's exactly what you said, kind of like build it in, but have you ever looked at, no, that's not a career gap. Let's reframe that. I took a sabbatical, okay? I took a break because I deserve it, because I'm that good. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, is that a thing?
And it's not even that. It's just like, I think when we take the narrative back and we run the narrative, it's so much more powerful than when we allow the narrative to run us, right? And so one of the things that we do with our entrepreneurs at MSN is we're like, do your financial projections and like do it for Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. And if you know or you think that you're going to have a PCS in Q3, then take your financial projections and redistribute what you think you want to make and know that Q3 is going to be just nothing. You're not doing anything, right? And then you can adjust it that way. But it's not so much the importance of, I have to make all this money in these. It's just to get them in the mindset that, there's going to be a disruption. And I need to, and if I'm really going to PCS proof my business and I really need to make this amount of money, then I need to like really hustle in those other 3 quarters so I can take the time and space that I need in the quarter where I think I'm going to PCS.
Yeah. And the one thing I would like to just put out there into the world is, and I do on a daily basis, and as cliche as it may sound, as tired of it as we may be of hearing, we need to be open to adapt and change. We need to be open to changing lanes. And I have a quick story, a spouse who was a chemist, like an actual honest to God, like scientist, by education and by trade. And until she opened herself up to new opportunities, she was miserable. All she was doing was trying to find how to continue being a chemist, through PCSs, and it wasn't working. So she was miserable, and she finally opened herself up to the idea of going to one of these employers that are raising their hand saying, hey, you also have these skills that we could use, right? That have nothing to do with being a chemist, but instead of being miserable for 3 years and not being able to work and affecting your lifelong earning potential and all of these other things, she finally opened herself up, and now she tells me she's happier than she's ever been in her life. So we have to be open to these things, right? We made the decision to marry a service member, and this is the life that we are living now. So being open to change and to new ideas and opportunities is the absolute number one piece of advice I could give.
I feel so seen, Brian, because like just in my career, sometimes the opportunities find you. Because I look at myself. I had a bachelor's and a master's in international relations. I speak 3 languages. I'm not using any of that. I'm not using any of it. And so I feel like my journey found me. Like I wasn't seeking that. I was looking for opportunities to use my training, my education, and what I should have been doing was looking for ways to manifest my passion, which ended up being serving military spouses.
And I think that goes back to the point that you made earlier, Sue, that it's not just college education that we need to get a good job or a good career. It's finding what we're good at, what we're passionate about, what we want to do, and figuring out how to be successful in that, whether it may be through college, it could be through a certification, technical something, taking a random class or course program here and there to get there. And so it's not always about college, because I'll add my name to that hat too, biology degree, and I do nothing with my biology degree. It's a pretty nice paper in a pretty frame that sits on the wall, looks good, but doesn't do anything.
No, and you know what? I think that our education and obviously we could create a whole doggone webinar / miniseries / encyclopedia when it comes to do we really need that piece of paper, but the way that I look at it is this, just like everybody else here, my background is social psychology. Yep, that's right. And I wanted to be a counselor because, that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't live anywhere long enough to get those supervision hours. And there are many military spouses who do that. Shout out, props all day. Not this girl right here. So what I did was I tabled it for another day. But you know what social psychology is? It's the study of people. Hi, peeps. How you doing? I'm around people all the time. Community outreach is people. So I could apply what I know and learned to other aspects of my life and take my expertise and turn it into something else and be innovative. And, Megan, you biology. Okay. So what the hell does biology have to do with PCSing? Not a whole lot, except for the fact that there's a lot of studies involved and there's a lot of lingo that the average American may not understand, and she is able to break it down. So she takes our policy and breaks it down. There are ways to adapt and overcome all of it. You just have to find that link between what you know, what you're doing, and find that innovation piece.
Yeah.
At the intersection. Yeah.
Because like Megan, being a scientist, she probably introduces rigor into a process that other people are overwhelmed by because it's too big. And she's like, I'm used to breaking things down. So I'm going to break it down. Here's the building blocks. And I can then explain it to you, layman. So that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And so before we, and Brian, if you, did you get a chance to piggyback off of Sue?
I feel like we've had a great conversation. I think that it's important that we continue this conversation. We continue to educate employers. We continue to develop our military spouse workforce and bring the two together. Appreciate everything Sue said. I'm such a big fan, a little fanboy over here. It's not just me. My husband also a big fan of Sue. Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Well, food for all of you. You guys all need to come over and socially distance outside because I would love to see all of you.
I'm telling you, this COVID thing, again, degree in people, that's because I love people, and not being able to people is really killing me right now. I'm just saying, we're allowed to say that. Let's just go ahead and acknowledge the suck for just a second.
It's rough. Because it's
a perfect time to develop yourself professionally. Take some classes. Everything's being offered online. I mean, you can really take this time to develop yourself and grow professionally. So Just
I'm like, shut up, Brian, with your positive Pollyanna. I'm just going to embrace the suck over here.
No, my gosh. Okay. So we're going to do a quick, there was so much engagement. By the way, everybody who asked a question, we ran so long because everything that they said was of value. So we're going to hit your questions up on the back end after this webinar. We've got questions for Megan. We've got questions for Sue and Brian too. And they are awesome. And I'm a parasite. Megan's a parasite. They're not getting rid of us anytime soon. I'm just saying. So we will have contact with them, and any question that we can't answer, we're going to bring them into that mix. Yeah. But since everybody was so amazeballs, yes, I said it, with their commenting and their questions and the concern and all of that, I am amazed. We have a very big wheel today, so I'm going to share my screen. And I did close all of my tabs, so nobody had to see my brain. You're welcome. Here, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so we are giving away a Hope Design necklace, and we are also giving away a PCS Grades t-shirt. And we're going to leave the bigger giveaway to allow our Oconus fans, which are, we have a very large Oconus following, as I say every week, and we're going to allow them to get in the mix because they're kind of sleeping right now, so we're just going to give them the opportunity to. So first up, that Hope Design necklace, I'm going to click to spin. Everybody, drum roll, please.
This is cool. I've never seen this before.
Oh, Sarah Rudd. Sarah.
Congratulations, Sarah.
Congrats, Sarah. Sarah, you get a Hope Design necklace. And just for the record, she actually was one of our winners in the past. She actually is going to end up getting the upgraded version of what we usually get from Hope Design. You're welcome. All right, next up is that t-shirt so we can be twinsies up in here. Ready, set, here we go. Kelly Rich. Oh my goodness.
Congratulations.
We're going to be twinsies. Congrats. Oh my gosh. Okay, so congrats to our winners. Kelly and Sarah, I have both of y'all's information, so I will go ahead and get that stuff out to you and notify you when it is out. Oh, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen before I freak everybody out. So let me just go ahead and say thank you to our guests. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Sue. All the shout outs. Y'all, these are military spouses who were in our shoes and decided to do something about some of the challenges that we face. So kudos to them. Remember them. Preach their word. Ask them questions and use the resources that they provided because, hi, I work for PCS Grades and I have a pretty cool job because of the advice that I followed through the resources that they just offered. You're welcome. Again, thank you so much, Megan, our PCS Perform Advocate, aka and BA, since there's little ears in your room because we love you. And of course, until next week, Megan.
This too shall PCS.
Bye, everybody.